بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. الحمد لله. اللهم افتح علينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام، وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الكرام ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. الحمد لله. بسم الله. وقد أكثرت من هذه المثل المنصوص على أنها جائزة، ومنها ما التزم دبر كل صلاة كالغناء الذي ذكره الشاطبي، ومنها ما التزم 40 مرة في كل يوم لرؤيا ريئت في النوم كما ذكره الشاطبي أيضا، ومنها ما فعل عمر عند الخروج من الخلاء على غير وضوء، ومنها ما هو من الراحات أو العادات، تنبيها على أن من وقف عندها وعند ما يشبهها قصار ما أقول إنه ظالم لنفسي، إن لم أقل إنه مقتصد، ولا أقول إنه مبتدع أو ضال، بل إن فعل شيئا من هذا قبل تسليمه التحليل من الفرض صحت صلاته عند أبي حنيفة، وإن فعلها بعد السلام وقبل تسليمة الرد صحت صلاته وفعل بدعة مذمومة، إذ حقيقة البدعة المذمومة حسب ما يأتي هي التي تميت السنة أو تكاد تفضي إلى إماتتها، وإن فعلها بعد تسليمة الرد صحت صلاته بإجماع وفعل جائزا. So he says that he mentioned a lot of these examples, like the example of the Imam who sang after the prayer, and that Imam Shatibi mentioned, or the Imam al-Kattani who saw in a dream that the Prophet ﷺ said, if you say 40 times every day, Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum, La ilaha illa anta, subhanaka, La ilaha illa anta. If you say that 40 times, Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum, La ilaha illa anta, if you say that, he said your heart won't die. So he said that people, and this is a problem because there are dhikrs that people have received in dreams. And so people will say that's not mansoos, that there's no sharia, that there's nothing from the Prophet ﷺ that said that. And this is a khilaf issue. Some of the ulama said, that they say the ibadat are tawqifiyya, and so you can't do any. And the ibadat are tawqifiyya. But dhikr is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, udhkuru Allah dhikran kathira. Dhikr is mutlaq. So as long as the sigha is in our tradition, it's not a bid'ah, like things saying subhanaka or ya hayyu ya qayyum, la ilaha illa anta, those type things, we have them in our religion. Adding a number to them, some of the ulama said that that's not acceptable. What he's saying is that other scholars said that it was permissible to do that from like a dream if he had it. It's important, though, that people understand that those things are not. There's the nadab, the recommended act is the dhikr. And if something was revealed to somebody through a dream or something like that, it's probably personally for him to do that. Some of the shuyukh have awrad and things like that they put together, as long as they're all from the tradition. And we know that some of the Sahaba had their own du'as, and the Prophet ﷺ aqarrahum ala dhalika, like the man who the Prophet ﷺ was praying, and he heard him say, when he said, Rabbana wa lakal hamd, hamdan kathiran tayyiban mubarakan fi, that was from one of the Sahaba. And the Prophet ﷺ looked at him, and he said, where did you get that from? And he said, it was just something I wanted to say. And the Prophet said that he heard the angels responding to that. So some of the ulama in Maliki madhab, they don't say that. But in some of the madhabs, they do say that from that sahabi. Now, obviously, the Prophet aqarrahu ala dhalika, and so it's from sunnah to taqrir. Because there's a sunnah of taqreer where the Prophet says something is acceptable, then it's a sunnah to do it even though he might not have initiated it. And there are many examples of that. But you can make dua in the prayer. Like when you're in sajda, you can say your du'as. The best ones to say are the ones the Prophet ﷺ said. But you can say, Allahumma wafiqni lima tuhibbu. You know, there's different things. So this is the point that he's making. As long as it's from the acceptable dhikrs, then there are ways that these have been transmitted, and people should not get troubled by those things. And then there are things that are he said about certain things, like Umar radiallahu anhu, الخروج عن الخلاء من غير وضوء ومنها ما هو من الراحات والعادات. That there are things that people do that are just customary, they're norms or practices that they do. And what he says is that the furthest that we could say about many of these things is that he's ظالم لنفسه, he could be doing something better. But he said, I would prefer to say he's muqtasid because he's doing something permitted. But we certainly shouldn't say that he's mubtadi' or dal. Right? We shouldn't go to that extreme. And he makes mention about certain things that people would do before they got out of their prayer, that they added or something like that. And again, he says that some of these things are bid'ah madhmuma, because the reality of a bid'ah is, and this is important, the reality of a bid'ah madhmuma is what causes the sunnah to die. So if you're leaving something of the sunnah and doing something that's not of the sunnah, and that by doing that thing, you're actually causing the sunnah to die, that's a bid'ah madhmuma. Because in that situation, there is a sunnah, and you're replacing it with a bid'ah. And so that's an important distinction. And then he said, إِن تَرَكَ ذَلِكَ لِمَا هُوَ أَرْفَعُ. But if they leave those things to what's more beneficial, or خَيْرٌ مِمَّا تَرَكَ, فهو سابق بالخيرات وإن تركها لأخس منها خوف آفة من خارج يعمل بذلك يدا على الله أن تعتقد العامة ما أنا في الحي حتى أنسب. So he says that if you do something that you could have done something, you're doing something better, then that's the sabiqun bil khairat. So you've left something that is less worthy and you're doing something more worthy. And then he says, فهو كقول العامة حائر بروحه مضل لغيره. The one who's confused in his own soul, he's going to lead others astray. مستهزئ بنظرائه مدخلون على الناس شغبا في دينهم وحيرة في قلوبهم وسوء ظن في مقلديهم كما يأتي للشيخ ابن السراج لا سيما إن كان هو المتروك من قبيل المشروع الذي لا يكون أبدا أحط من المباح ومن نظره لزمه ولو أوصى بجزاء عليه لوجب تنفيذ الوصية. So again, he's talking about, things that people do, that they practice in and of themselves from things that are acceptable. لا يكون أبدا أحط من المباح. You can't put them lower than mubah. So they might not be the best things to do, but you shouldn't in any way attack them for doing them. And he says that سيأتي أيضا للأئمة الذين لا ينعقد للمسلمين إجماع بدونهم من شافعية ومالكية أن ما اختلف في مشروعيته فقال بعض الأئمة إنه مكروه وقال بعضهم إنه مستحب إن فعل ذلك أفضل. وقال عز ابن عبد السلام وذلك كرفع اليدين. وقال إنما قلنا هذا لأن الشرع يحتاط لفعل المندوبات كما يحتاط لفعل الواجبات. So he's saying that if there's a difference of its permissibility or not, then some of the imams, for instance, said it was makruh, not encouraged, and others said it was mustahab, it was encouraged. He said, "Inna fi'la dhalika afdal." To do it is actually better in that type of situation because it's an area of difference of opinion. I'll give you an example. Reading Quran for dead people. That's a khilaf issue. The majority of ulama say it's permissible. Some say that it's not. In that situation, what Ibn Rushd said, this is an ikhtilaf in the rahmah of Allah. The difference here is about the rahmah of Allah. Can you help the dead with your recitation and give it to them or not? He's saying it's better to err on the side of rahmah. That yes, that will benefit that person. So here's an example where the imams differed, but they said this is a difference about Allah's mercy. And we should encourage people to help the dead, because one of the things of our ummah, and Martin Links has a beautiful poem about religions and remembering the dead, because this is something that we do, we remember the dead. And this is why Muslims always say, when they mention dead people, Rahimahu Allah, because those things help those people. And so we don't forget that we're going to hope that people will, yatarahmu alayna, after we die, they'll actually say those things. Because these are dua for these people. The Prophet ﷺ said, if somebody dies and you get enough people to do shafa'ah for him, 40 people with good hearts, and they pray over him, he'll be forgiven. And this is why for janazah, it's encouraged to have a lot of people to come and pray janazah, because it's going to help these people. So we should think about the dead and remember the dead. And when we do, we say rahimahullah, especially our parents or our, and others. The righteous. Like people, if you mention the Prophet ﷺ's name, you should say Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He said, it's enough to call a man a miser who hears my name and doesn't give me the benedictions. Because, and it's not him boasting, it's not like, look at all I've done for you, but look at all he's done for us. Right? He's not saying that to us. He's saying that person who can mention my name without saying, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, this man has not contemplated what I did for him. And the same is true for the great ulama. Radiyallahu anhu, qaddasallahu sirruhu, rahimuhu Allah. We say these things as an act of gratitude. Man lam yashkur nas lam yashkurillah. If you haven't shown gratitude towards people, you certainly haven't shown gratitude towards Allah, because those people are the asbab by which Allah has given you good. And so it's really important to keep that in mind. And so he said, like raising the hands, for instance, in the dua. The mawlid is an example of that. Ikhtilaf issue. The majority said it was permissible. A minority said that it was a bid'ah. That's fine. If people don't want to do it, they don't do it. There's certainly those people, and to be fair, those people are not doing it because they want to follow the Prophet ﷺ. So what's the impulse behind them not doing the mawlid is not because they don't love the Prophet or don't want to celebrate the Prophet. It's because they want to follow the Prophet, and they said, he didn't tell us to do this. And the mas'alatu tark is a khilaf issue. If he didn't do something, some of the ulama said you shouldn't do it. But other ulama said, no, it just meant that he left it up to you. So these are masail that are related to what's called tark. They're issues related to tark. And Shaykh Abdullah bin Bayy wrote an extraordinary book called Al-Mashahid min al-Maqasid about this very issue. That many things have been left to us. You can't add 5 rakats to dhuhr. That is bid'ah muharrama. But if you want to pray 20 rakats before dhuhr, it's nafilah. The Prophet's practice was 4 before and 4 after. But there's nothing that says you can't pray 20 if you want to pray 20 and you have the time. So there's things that you can do as long as you understand the Prophet prayed 4. There's things that you can do that are left for us. You could pray 100 rakats at night. But the sunnah is 8 rakats or 10 rakats. But you could pray 100 if you want. You can add more. Those things are left to you. That's tark. The same with the Quran. The Prophet ﷺ recited the Quran. He said, don't recite it in more than 3 days, right? So, but some of the great scholars recited the Quran in one night. And that's warid, even on some of the Sahaba. But the Prophet ﷺ said, don't do it because you won't understand it that way. And part of the purpose of the Quran is tadabbur. The best is to do it every month, once a month. That's the tradition. That's why there's 30 hizb, 1 hizb a day. That was the tradition of many Muslims around the Muslim world, was to do a hizb. And then they did 60 juz. So you do a juz in the morning, a juz in the evening, a juz at Fajr, a juz at Asr. They used to do it after Asr because they often did it in the masjid in group recitation like they do in Morocco. That's also masaratul tark. The Prophet ﷺ did not do it in group recitation, but there's no dalil that it's prohibited to do it in group recitation. What Ibn Mas'ud said in that tradition is something different, because the hadith in Sahih Muslim says, مَجْتَمَعَ قَوْمًا فِي بَيْتٍ مِّن بِيُوتِ اللَّهِ يَتْلُونَ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ. That if a group gets together in a house from the houses of Allah and recites the Quran together, then the Prophet ﷺ said that the sakina will come down on them, right? نزلت عليهم السكينة وغشيتهم الرحمة وحفتهم الملائكة وذكرهم الله في من عندهم. So that's the blessing of doing that. And so traditionally they would gather and recite. And Imam al-Nawawi, one of the great muttabi'in, I mean, he's one of the great followers of the Sunnah. Imam Nawawi said in his book on the Quran that gathering together to recite the Quran in a group is fadila. وَفَاضِلٌ مَنْ دَعَى إِلَيْهَا. It's a virtuous act, and he is virtuous who calls people to do that. You know, these things, traditionally, people did these things because much of it, when we gather together, if there's no dhikr, there's no real barakah in the gathering. There should be some dhikr in the gathering when you get together to talk about God, to remind each other. Many people, when they get together, it's ghiba, it's namima, it's zur, it's kidhib, it's all these horrible, bad qualities of the tongue. And so this is what he's saying. And then he says, Imam al-Qarafi said, وَلِيَنَا الْقَائِلْ بِالشَّرْعِيَّةِ مُثْبِتٌ لِأَمْرٍ وَلَمْ يَطَّلِعْ عَلَيْهِ النَّافِي وَالْمُثْبِتْ مُقَدَّمْ قَالَ كَتَعَارَضَ الْبَيِّنَاتِ. So this is from Imam al-Qarafi, who wrote a very important book called Furuq. And he said the one who's saying that this is from the Sharia is called a muthbit. He's asserting that an act is from the Sharia. And the one, لِأَمْرٍ لَمْ يَطَّلِعْ عَلَيْهِ النَّافِي. And he's saying it often because of something that the one negating it is unaware of. So for instance, if somebody says, you can't sit in a circle and do dhikr together, because he knows the hadith, the athar on Ibn Mas'ud, from Ibn Mas'ud. But the other one looked at the hadith, مَجْتَمَعَ قَوْمٌ فِي بَيْتٍ مِّن بِيُوتِ اللَّهِ. And so he says, this is a dalil that you can do it. It's a proof that you can do it. So what he says is the muthbit is muqaddam ala nafi, generally. The one asserting something is taken before the one negating. Unless obviously the dalil is very strong. But generally when the adillah when there's ta'arud, then you look at the muthbit before the nafi. So he's muqaddam. قال الشيخ ابن لب إذا كان عمل الناس على قول لبعض العلماء فلا ينبغي إنكاره. So that one of these great, Ibn Lubbin was one of the great shuyukh of Granada. In the Dibaj al-Mudahib, he said, كان شيخا فاضلا عالما متفننا انفرد برياسة العلم وإليه كان المفزع في الفتوى وكان إماما في أصول الدين وأصول الفقه وتخرج به جماعة من الفضلاء وله تآليف مفيدة. So this is what in Ibn Farhun's Tabaqat, the biographical literature of the Malikis, he said about Ibn Lubbin that he was well-versed, a great scholar, well-versed. He was unique in his leadership of knowledge at his time, and he was the one that people referred to for the fatwa at his time. He was an imam in usul al-din, aqidah, usul al-fiqh, and also juristic reasoning. And many great scholars, virtuous, came from him. He also has many good writings. So Ibn Lubbin said, إذا كان عمل الناس على قول لبعض العلماء فلا ينبغي إنكاره. If people would just follow this one qaida, we would eliminate so much of the problems that are in our community. He said, if people are doing an act based upon a valid scholar's opinion, then it should not be rejected. It shouldn't be rejected. So if you have ulama that say you can do this thing, and other ulama that say you can't do it, leave people alone. They have their dalil, and leave them alone. لا سيما إن كان الخلاف في كراهية, especially if the difference of opinion is in whether or not it's makruh or not. والأفضل القيام بالمشروع والمسارعة إلى فعله, and the best is to see that it's a good thing and you should hasten to do good things. ولا يعارض ذلك بما عسى أن يعتقده جاهل بسبب جهله, and this does not contradict what sometimes an ignorant person, because of his ignorance, believes. ففي الوضوء والصلاة والصيام وسائر الوظائف المشروعة فضائل يقام بها ويثابر عليها ولم يقل أحد بتركها مخافة اعتقاد الوجوب بها. قال وقد أشكل على الناس كلام مالك في مخالفة هذا الأصل في صيام 6 من شوال، واختلفوا في توجيه قوله وكيف يستقيم لأحد أن يقيس على هذا غيره. So he said that, you know, there are things that we do in wudu. For instance, in wudu, you're supposed to put the ina on the right side, right? And I learned that, right? But then I was with Marabt al-Hajj, and he put it on the left side. So I was like, you know, aren't you supposed to put it on the right side? This is ignorance. Instead of saying, he put it on the right side. What's the wisdom in that? Well, I found out later that if it's a closed ina and you have to pour, then you put it on your left side. So if it's open, you put it on your right side. If it's closed, you put it on your left side. These are the adab of wudu. And that's what he's saying. You have certain things that are from the adab, also in prayer, in fasting, in doing other, you know, breaking your fast in Egypt. It's wajib to have amruddin. By urf. You know, it's like you haven't broken your fast if you don't have this, right? That's just the urf of the people. I'm exaggerating, obviously it's not wajib. But that's their urf. There's certain things that people do that become part of their culture. And people see it as it's just part of the culture. So there's certain things that you do. And then he says, these are things like, for instance, doing Inna anzalnahu fi laylatul qadr after finishing wudu 3 times. That's a practice that some of the righteous do. And I found it in more than one book. Marabt al-Hajj did it. I haven't seen it like a hadith or a dalil for it. So I don't know where that came from, right? But that's something that the righteous have done. And that's what he's saying. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, he said, وَلَمْ يَقُلْ أَحَدٌ بِتَرْكِهَا. Nobody said to stop it. مَخَافَةَ اعْتِقَادِ الْوُجُوبِ, out of fear that people will think it's an obligation. And then he said, now some people find it a little problematic what Malik said about going against this principle in fasting the 6 days of Shawwal. Imam Malik radiallahu anhu said about the 6 days of Shawwal, he considered it makruh to do it immediately after Ramadan. So you do Ramadan, you have the Eid, which is prohibited to fast on the Eid, and then you have these 6 days. The hadith says, "Man atba' Ramadan bi sittin min Shawwal, faka'annama sama dahr." Whoever follows Ramadan with 6 days from Shawwal, it's as if he's fasted all of the year. But obviously, because 30 days and then 6, 360, the year is 354 lunar, 365 solar. 360 is like fasting the whole year, right? So each being 10 times so it's as if he fasted the whole year. So Imam Shafi'i said the min here is the min of tab'id. It's a partitive min. And so it means you have to fast it in Shawwal. and the best is to follow it up immediately. So Imam Shafi'i said you should do it right there. In Yemen, it's almost part of Ramadan in some places in Yemen. For people who have been in Yemen, if you go to Yemen, it's like Ramadan continues for 6 days after the Eid. And they do it as a group, and they break the fast as a group. Imam Malik has something in his madhab in which sometimes he will leave something that's good out of fear that people will think it's an obligation. And so he said this is a problem, considering these things. And so this is an ishkal. Imam Malik said the 6 days of Shawwal, that min is called min al-ibtida, because you have different types of min. You have min al-bayan, وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ. Min al-Quran, all of the Quran. Min there, yubayyin jins, yubayyin al-jins. So it's min al-bayan. And then you have akaltu min al-khubzi. That's a partitive min, tab'id. I ate from the bread. I didn't eat the whole bread, I ate a portion of it. That's min al-tab'id. So min Shawwal means to fast 6 days from Shawwal. Then you have min al-ibtida, ataytu min Makkata. I came from Mecca, beginning in Mecca. So Imam Malik said that min in the hadith is the min of ibtida. Ibtida and min Shawwal. As long as you fast beginning from Shawwal and complete those 6 days before the next Ramadan, you've fulfilled the sunnah of that hadith. That was Malik's position. Which one is right? They're both right. That's musawwiba. And if you look at Imam Sha'rani's Misan, what he says is some do the tashdid and some do the tarkhis. And the imams, when they differ, there's murakhis and mu'azzam. So in this case, Imam Malik is the murakhis, he's giving you more leeway, and Imam Shafi'i is the mushaddid, he's narrowing the possibilities. And this is a rahmah for the ummah, ikhtilafu ummati rahmah. So he says that, and then he says, ثم قال فهذا جهالة عظيمة ما حمل من أنكره على إنكاره إلا أنه أبصر ما أمامه ولم يلتفت إلى ما خلف وراءه. He said this is a type of ignorance. So the one who rejects these things based on this, he said إلا أنه ما أبصر ما أمامه ولم يلتفت إلى ما خلف وراءه. He can see what's in front of him, but he can't see what's behind him. In other words, he doesn't حفظت شيئا وغابت عنك أشياء. You know something, but a lot of things are hidden from you. وقف على بعض مسائل في المذهب ولم يهتدي لواضح سبيله ولا شعر بوجهها ودليلها ولا علم اختلاف العلماء في أصلها ولم يعطيها من الفهم وتأمل حقها ورأى أن العمل بخلاف ما انتهى إليه فهمه فيها فظن أن لا علم إلا ما علم ولا فهم إلا دون ما فهم استحقر العامة وجهل الخاصة ورأى أنه وحده على الجادة وصار في قيامه على الناس بالنكير كما قيل إنباض بغير توتير وحاد ليس له بعير. It's an amazing statement. Really beautiful. He said, look at this ignoramus. He said, he thinks that he's got the only understanding, he's got the only dalil, that all this ikhtilaf is just from this ignorance. He didn't give it proper understanding. He didn't reflect on the haqq. He sees that anybody that goes against him, it's obviously because they have no understanding. He thinks that there's no knowledge except his knowledge. There's no understanding except his understanding. He considers the amma idiots. He considers the khassa ignoramuses. He thinks that the common people are stupid, and he thinks that the elect are ignorant. He thinks he's the only one on the road to God. So he's just criticizing everybody, condemning everybody. Like it said, he's strumming without any strings. And he's stirring the camel on without any camels. بعض كلام شيخ الشيوخ ابن لب. So that's plucking without strings, right? And stirring the camel on without camel. Like he's got nothing to be doing what he's doing. So this is from Ibn Lubbin. This is deep understanding. This is the only thing that would unite our ummah. is this type of understanding. And, it's like I feel like he was in Andalusia watching the collapse of his ummah in Andalusia because they all started fighting and there were all these Muruk al-Tawaif and everything. And it's like he just put this book out to the rest of the ummah. If you guys want to hold yourselves together, we couldn't do it here, but here's the way. That's how I feel about this book. It's kind of like, practice this or else it's going to happen to you what happened to us. And then he says, وهذا تكلم عليه أيضا السيد مفتي تونس البرزري في المنكر الدعاء أدبر ثروات ونحو ذلك قائلا لم تسير بسيرة السلف في أن الأمر بالمعروف يكون بمعروف وقال سبحانه وتعالى فقولا له قولا لينا وهذا إذا كان المأمور به واجبا بإجماع أو المنهي عنه محرما بإجماع وأنت قد عمدت إلى مستحب جائز الترك أو مكروه جائز الفعل أو مباح وغيره خير منه وجل ذلك أو كله مختلف فيه. So he said these people, this is Imam al-Barzuli, one of the great Tunisian imams. He said these people are not following the Salaf in commanding to good because you have to command to good with a good. Look at what Allah said to Moses and Harun when they go to Pharaoh, speak gently to him. And that's Pharaoh. So what about this poor Muslim? Right? How are you going to command him to good? And he said, in this, we're talking about things that are wajib by ijma', they're obligations by consensus of the ummah, or they're prohibited by consensus. These guys are looking at things that are recommended that you don't have to do, or makruh that you can do, or mubah where you could do something better than it. And most of these things are مختلفي. We have difference of opinion about them. ثم ذكر عن هذا الذي هو يتحدث معه أنه كبر هذه الأشياء وصيرها مناكير وقال قصاراها الاستحباب والكراهة أو الإباحة على اختلاف فيها أو في بعضها تركت أو فعلت لموجب قابل للاستحباب والكراهة أو الإباحة وأخذ فيها بغير مذهب مالك المرجح وجرى عليه عمل الناس من غير نكير. So he says that these things were mentioned, that he's making a big deal out of these things and turning them into manakir. And the furthest you could say about it is istihbab, it's recommended, or it's makruh, or it's ibaha, based on the differences of opinion, leaving them or doing them, based on whether they're encouraged or not recommended or permissible. And then they take, other than the madhab of Malik, which was the madhab that they were encouraged to follow in that country, and they وَجَرَ عَلَيْهِ عَمَلُ النَّاسِ مِنْ غَيْرِ نَكِيرٍ, and it's what people practice without nobody telling them not to do it. سيأتي أن أمر الحسبة ليس بالهوينة. You're going to learn that this hisba, this regulatory mechanism in our sharia of calling to good, enjoining good, and forbidding evil is not an easy thing. انظر النصوص الصريحة بالنهي في القرآن والسنة في مثل هذه الأمور أعني مما هو وارد على ما في ملك الإنسان أنه نهي أدب أو إرشاد أو نهي تحريم حسب ما أبينه في المقام السادس قصار أمره إن لم يكون النهي عن فاضل لأفضل منه أنه مكروه والمكروه من قبيل الجائز. So he said that look at these clear texts about prohibition in the Quran and the Sunnah in many affairs. And I'm talking about, for instance, what concerns a man's personal property. It's a nahyu adban wa irshad. For instance, there's a nahi of some of the ulama put of having a wasiyah for ahl al-dhimma, right? So people that aren't from your own religious community, you don't give them things in your will. That nahi is adab and irshad, that there's people that you should be helping before because al-aqrabun awla bil ma'ruf, but it's not a prohibition. So if somebody did it, you can't make inkar of them and say you can't do that. And then he said, وَانْظُرْ فِيمَا هُوَ أَعْظَمُ قول ابن شاس. Look at something even greater, what Ibn Shas said. لو رفع إرقاض النكاح امرأة زوجت نفسها بغير ولي فقال لا أجيزه أن هذا ليس بحكم. قال الإمام ابن عرفة مقتضى هذا أن لغيره بعده أن ينقضه، والظاهر أنه لا يجوز للثاني نقضه، لأن قول الأول لا أجيزه حكم منه بأنه مكروه، والكراهة أحد أقسام الشرع الخمسة يجب رعي كل حكم منها ولازمه، وحكم مكروه عدم نقضه بعد وقوعه. It's a really important point here. He said, look at something even bigger than these other things about marriage. If a qadi, if somebody comes to a judge and says this woman married herself without a wali, and he says, La ujizuhu, I don't permit it. This is not a legal ruling from him. قال الإمام Ibn Arafah said, the meaning of this is that it's not permitted for somebody to rescind that marriage after him saying that. Why? Because what he's saying is, it's not permitted in my madhab, right? And what he's saying is it's makruh. والكراهة أحد أقسام الشرع الخمسة يجب رعي كل حكم منها ولازمي. So you have to follow every hukum and what follows from that legal ruling. And the hukum of makruh is عدم نقضه بعد وقوعه. You can't, if something's makruh, you can't rescind it after it's happened. So if you have a contract and there's something makruh in it, even though you did something that was better that you shouldn't have done, you don't rescind it. So a woman in the Hanafi madhab is permitted to marry herself without a wali. She's her own wali. تتولى أمرها. She's her own wali. And the hadith that there's no valid marriage without a wali does not apply based on that understanding. And so even though Malik said she has to have a wali, Abu Hanifa said she can be her own wali. And so in that case, if the marriage happened, you don't rescind it. قال Ibn al-Arabi, التوبة من المكروه مستحبة, that it's encouraged to make tawbah from a makruh. Remember, he's talking about maqam al-jid. He's talking about the highest maqam still. So these people make tawbah from the makruh. I mean, one of them said, you don't have ma'rifah of Allah until you make tawbah from your khawatir. Because these are people that they don't allow bad thoughts into their minds. They control their thoughts. انظر إذا كانت الكراهة بترك فاضل لأفضل وربما يحتسب المحتسب فيترك المحتسب عليه ما فيه فضل ولا يترقى لأفضل. So look at, if it's makruh, if they should have left it for something better, the muhtasib, the regulator, the one calling to good and forbidding evil, he can leave that person in what he's doing and consider it better. Like Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah mentions in I'lam al-Muwaqqi'in that he was with Ibn Taymiyyah and they passed by some of the Mongols and they were drinking alcohol. And he said, shouldn't we condemn them? He said, listen, leave them doing this because they'll be out raping and pillaging. It's better they're doing this than doing that. This is it. Imam Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah saw this himself. And he said this is from his fiqh. Because قِلَّةُ الْإِثْمِ خَيْرٌ مِّن كَثْرَتِهِ. A little bit of evil is better than a lot of evil. So it's better they're doing that than they're doing something else that's worse. The same is about chess. People playing chess. In another one, they said, why don't you condemn them? He said, this preoccupies them from backbiting. Let them play their game. Because if you take that away from them, they'll just sit around talking about bad people. This is the hukum of the hisbah of zalim li nafsihi, not of the higher people. قال الشاطبي في موافقته قد رأيت ترك ترخصي في مواضع الترخص يوقع في مفسدة أو مفاسد يعظم موقعها شرعا. Imam Shatibi said that I've seen leaving these licenses for people in many places where the license is acceptable leads to a greater mafsada, a greater harm. So what he's saying is that if you don't allow these licenses for people, it actually leads to worse problems. So, قال Ibn al-Arabi, the great Qadi, قِلَّةُ الْإِثْمِ بِنَسْبَةِ إِلَى كَثْرَتِهِ خَيْرٌ كَثِيرٌ. I didn't know that was coming. It gets back. This is the qaida, this is the rule. A little bit of evil in relation to a lot of evil is a great good, right? قِلَّةُ الْإِثْمِ بِنَسْبَةِ إِلَى كَثْرَتِهِ خَيْرٌ كَثِيرٌ. وقال في الإحياء هكذا ينبغي أن تفهم حمد ما يحمد وذم ما يذم وإلا جهلت قول القائل الصادق حسنات الأبرار سيئات المقربين. You have to understand this of what's praiseworthy and why it's praiseworthy, and what's blameworthy and why it's blameworthy. And if you don't understand this, you will be misunderstand what this truthful statement is, that the good deeds of righteous people are the bad deeds of people in the highest station. حسنات الأبرار سيئات المقربين. وقال في موضع آخر مباحات العوام سيئات الأبرار. What is permissible for the common people are bad deeds of righteous people. Everything's relative, even sinfulness. I mean, this is something that our ummah, we need to understand with each other. And then he says, على قوة الخلاف تقوى مراعاته, based on how strong the khilaf is the strength of guarding it and watching out, being vigilant about it. وسيأتي في المقام السادس أن ما اختلف في مشروعيته إن فعله أولى. So if there's difference about whether or not it's legislated or not, doing it is more appropriate. And he said, وَإِنَّ بِمَوْتِ النَّبِيِّ أُمِنَ أَنْ يُلْحَقَ بِالْفَرَائِضِ مَا لَيْسَ مِنْهَا. Because with the death of the Prophet, we don't have to worry about things being considered fard. Like the Prophet wanted to command his ummah to do siwak before every prayer, but he was worried that it would become a fard, and so he didn't do it. Right? Because he took great care of his teeth. He flossed his teeth every day. He brushed them. He brushed his tongue. We know all these things. And his dental hygiene was impeccable. But he was worried that it would be too hard for his community. So he let it go. But it's a sunnah to do the siwak before every prayer if you're able to. In the Maliki, not in the masjid, because it's considered like brushing your teeth in the masjid. But you do it at where you do wudu. The Shafi'is, they brush their teeth in the masjid. So, but the Malikis, Imam Malik didn't do it. And that was the adab of the people of Medina. They didn't do it inside the masjid. They did it when they did their wudu. And وَكُلُّهُمْ عَلَى الْهُدَى إن شاء الله. وإن القرب إذا شهد شرع باعتبار جنسها فهي مندوبة. In devotional acts, as long as the Sharia recognizes the genus, then the species is manduba, it's recommended, right? As long as it recognizes the genus, then the species is. So dhikr is the genus. There are many ways to do dhikr. وسيأتي في المقام السادس أخيرا إن النوافل ما قدر الشرع أن في فعله ثوابا من غير أن أمر به أو رغب فيه أو فعله. So the nawafil are the things the Sharia has said that in doing them there's a thawab, whether or not it commands specifically to do that or encourages it, or the Prophet ﷺ did it himself. It's that what's important is those things like dhikr. There's a reward in remembering God. وسيأتي أن المساعدة فيما لا إثم فيه مندوبة لعل أن تعتاض بما تترك من الأفضل لأجل المساعدة. So مساعدة here is like, when you substitute something that you've missed, it's encouraged to do that, right? So لعل أن تعتاض بما تترك من الأفضل لأجل المساعدة ثواب المحسنين والله سبحانه وتعالى ما على المحسنين من سبيل. So like for instance, some of the ulama say that like in our madhab, you don't make up witr if you missed it, right? But some of the ulama say because other madhabs permit that the Malikis should do it anyway, just as a way of to do riyada for the self, so that you don't get used to not doing something. These are examples of that, where you can compensate for what you've done. If you missed your wird, if you do a wird every day, like a wird of Quran or a wird of adhkar, like the Prophet ﷺ, he did certain things every day. If you miss that, then you can make it up later. That will help you on your path. وسيأتي أيضا في آخر المقام السادس أن النهي إذا كان على ما في ملكك أنه نهي أدب وإرشاد، وقد يكون النهي عن فاضل لأفضل، كما يقال يكره للقاعد في المسجد أن يترك القراءة والذكر، وللمجاور بمكة أن لا يحج كل عام، وللمتزوج أن يعزل. وعلى هذا حمل ابن رشد كراهة الوصية للذم. وقال عياض ما اختلف العلماء في تحليله وتحريمه فلا يقال فيه حرام، وقال في أول الإكمال وإنما يغير منه ما اجتمع على إحداثه وإنكاره. ورشح محي الدين النووي كلام عياض قائلا أما المختلف فيه فلا إنكار فيه، وليس للمفتي ولا للقاضي أن يعترض على من خالفه إذا لم يخالف نص القرآن والسنة والإجماع. This is another, he's keeps emphasizing this thing because this is such a problem in our community. He says that you will see in the Maqam al-Sadis that there's things that are prohibited about your own personal property and what you have right to, out of adab and irshad. I have an old dictionary from the late 19th century, and it translated into English the Arabic word adab as ethics, which I thought was so interesting because in the Muslim world, that's really what adab is. It's akhlaq. It's another word for akhlaq. So we tend to think of it as courtesy, but it's really deeper than courtesy. It's a central theme of our ummah. There's a beautiful dictionary set in the West, which are the cultural dictionaries of languages, and it really helped me to study I studied the Mexican cultural dictionary. My family's Mexican, and so it helped me to understand better. The Mexican culture is very different from and there are multiple European cultures in America. So you have, you can't equate, for instance, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants with Irish Catholics. These are very different cultures in America. And so, even though they're both white, they're different. They come out of very different cultural, and they have a different set of cultural understandings. But in Mexican culture, and obviously you can't lump all Mexican culture because you have the Indian culture, the mestizo culture, you have the more Hispanic, European type of culture. Because in Mexico you have the light-skinned Mexicans that tend to pride themselves on being European. Same in Argentina and many other places. But there are certain things that really are helpful to understand a different culture. And we really need a dictionary of Arabic cultural of Muslim cultural terms. It would be really useful to help people, because the Pakistanis have theirs, it would be really useful to have that. Like in Saudi Arabia, there's a whole set of cultural terms that they understand. Inshallah means a lot of different things in Arabic. Are you coming to the Uzuma? Inshallah. But if you, wallahi, inshallah, I'll do it. That's very different from saying inshallah, right? So they're different in different places. So the adab, some things are prohibited out of adab and irshad. وَقَدْ يَكُونَ النَّهْيُ عَنْ فَاضِلٍ لِأَفْضَلٍ. Sometimes it's telling you not to do a virtuous act because there's a more virtuous act to be done. كما يقال يكره للقاعد في المسجد أن يترك القراءة والذكر. Sitting in the masjid is a good thing, but it's makruh just to sit there and not do anything. You should be doing dhikr and reading Quran. But sitting there not doing dhikr and qira'at al-Quran is better than sitting there backbiting with another person sitting there next to you, right? So everything is relative in that way. And the same is true like for the Mujawir in Mecca, like they should make Hajj every year because they're in Mecca. There's no taklif of having to travel and do these things. Or لِلْمُتَزَوِّجْ أَنْ يَعْزِلْ, it's makruh for the person to not inseminate in their spouse, to practice birth control. Makruh, but it's permitted. The Prophet didn't say it's haram, right? So these are examples of that. And وقال عياض ما اختلف العلماء في تحريره وتحريم فلا يقال فيه حرام. قاضي عياض, these are our great ulama. قاضي عياض said, if the ulama differed on something, you cannot say it's haram. If they differ, don't say it's haram. And beware, because لا تفتروا على الله الكذبة. Don't make lies on God that this is halal or this is haram. وقال في أول الإكمال وإنما يغير منهم ما اجتمع أو يغير منهم ما اجتمع على إحداثه وإنكاره. So the only thing that can be removed as a munkar is what they agree on, that it's a bid'ah, madhmuma, and it's a munkar. And Muhyiddin An-Nawawi, he preferred to be called Yahya. He didn't like that. His father named him Muhyiddin, but he felt it was like a claim, so he preferred to be called Yahya. Muhyiddin, I always say, like, in those days they had Shamsuddin, Sirajuddin, Muhyiddin. They had all these beautiful names, like the sun of the religion, the moon of the religion, the light of the religion, the help of the religion. This is very common in the East. Now we need like Shawkatuddin, Mal'aqatuddin, Kaslanuddin, Mu'attiruddin. These are the names that are more appropriate today, like the fork of the religion and the one, making the religion look ugly, Muqabbih ad-Din. So he says, as for what's mukhtalif fihi, there's no inkar in it. This is Muhyiddin An-Nawawi. وَلَيْسَ الْمُفْتِي, it's not for the mufti or the qadi to oppose something because they differ with another in it, as long إذا لم يخالف نص القرآن. Now, nas in usul is a very specific thing. In other words, if it's khilaf, if it's zahirun nas, if it's mubham, if it's mujmal, if it's muqayyid, if it's mutlaq, there's different considerations. But nas sarih min al-Quran is there's no doubt about it. If it goes against nas al-Quran or the sunnah or the ijma', then you can condemn it. Otherwise, no. وانظر في آخر المقام السادس من فتية الشاطبي إذا كان عمل الناس على قول مرجوح في النظر لا يعرض لهم يجروا أنهم قلدوه في الزمان الأول وجرى به العمل. If you'll see in the مقام السادس from Imam Shatibi about the futya, the fatwa, if the people are acting according to a weaker opinion based on your understanding, don't concern yourself with it and consider it to be something that was done earlier and now the amal, this is what people are doing. Because if you condemn it, it will lead to a fitna. So even though it might be a weaker position, by trying to force people to change that position that's become something that they practice, you're going to create fitna. And fitna is al-fitnatu akbaru min al-qatli. It's worse than killing people. Don't make fitna amongst the Muslims. ومن مقدمات ابن رشد. So Ibn Rushd's مقدمات ما اختلف العلماء في تحريره وتحريمه فهو مكروه ومن تركه أجر ومن فعل به لا يأثم. Whatever the ulama have differed about its permissibility or its prohibition, it's makruh. If you leave it, you'll get a reward, and if you do it, you're not sinful. وقال القرافي وعز الدين من أتى شيئا مختلفا فيه يعتقد تحريمه أنكر عليه لانتهاكه لحرمته وإن اعتقد تحليله لم ينكر عليه إلا أن يكون مدرك المحلل ضعيفا ينقض الحكم بمثله في الشرع Imam al-Qarafi and Izzuddin ibn Salam said, whoever does something in which there's difference of opinion about, believing that it's haram, it should be condemned if he does it, because it's sacrilegious. What he's doing is intihak al-hurma, that he's violating the sanctity of that act. But if he believes that it's permissible, he should not be condemned for it. إِلَّا أَن يَكُونْ مُدْرَكَ الْمُحَلِّلْ ضَعِيفًا, unless the one who considers it permitted, his proof is very weak. يُنْقَدَرْ حُكْمُ بِمِثْلِهِ فِي الشَّرْعِ. In that way, the category is rescinded by its like in our Sharia. وقال أبو عمر في التمهيدي. This is really important. Abu Umar is Ibn Abd al-Barr, one of the greatest scholars in our history, حافظ المغرب. قال أبو عمر في تمهيده: ألا ترى أن الصحابة اختلفوا وهم الأسوة لم يعب أحد منهم على صاحبه اجتهاده ولا وجد عليه في نفسه إلى الله الشكوى وهو المستعان على أمة نحن بين أظهرها تستحل الأعراض إذا خلفت. He said, look at these Sahaba. They differed, and they're our example. And yet when they differed, one didn't fault the other, and he didn't even find something in himself that made him dislike the other. And then he says, to God is our complaint, and to God is our help, with an ummah that we're living amongst that considers it permissible to attack the dignity and honor of others just because you've disagreed with them? SubhanAllah. ونقل أبو عمر بسنده إلى الثوري, Imam al-Thawri, one of our mujtahideen, Abu Umar, with a isnad muttasil. So Ibn Abd al-Barr says, قال إذا رأيت الرجل يعمل بالعمل الذي اختلف فيه وأنت ترى غيره فلا تنهاه. This is the early Salaf. Imam al-Thawri is like Imam Malik or Abu Hanifa. He said, if you see a man doing something in which there's a difference of opinion and you believe that it's wrong, don't tell him not to do it. وقد أمر المهدي مالكا أن يجمع مذهبه في كتاب يحمل الناس عليه. فقال مالك: أصحاب رسول الله تفرقوا في البلاد وأخذ أهل كل ناحية عمن وصل إليهم فدع الناس وما هم عليه. Imam Malik was asked by the Caliph Mahdi, let's gather your school, put it in a book, and force everybody to follow it. Look what Malik said, radiallahu anhu. The companions of the Prophet dispersed in the lands, and each group took their understanding with them and what had come to them. So leave people alone in what they're doing. You know, this is an ummah of ikhtilaf. This is a beautiful statement. This is an ummah of ikhtilaf. Just leave people alone. Leave them alone. If they're doing something and it's mukhtalif fihi, maybe he is zalimun li nafsi. There he is, playing his flute or whatever, or playing his shatranj, or watching his movies, or whatever they're doing. He's zalimun li nafsi, but astafahu Allah, because he says, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. He believes in the Quran. He's from the people that Allah has chosen according to Nass al-Quran. ثم أورثنا الكتاب الذين اصطفينا من عبادنا فمنهم ظالم لنفسه. Yes, there are amongst these chosen people that wrong themselves. ومنهم مقتصدون, and then there's people that are so-so. ومنهم سابق بالخيرات. Then there's the outstrippers بإذن الله. ذلك هو الفضل الكبير. جنات عدن يدخلونها. We've got paradises in Eden. They're all going to be there. I don't want that zalim li nafsi in there. Why does he get to go? He doesn't deserve it. Who are you? Do you proportion God's rahmah? You're the one that is going to decide. Jannah's a hotel. We've already booked it, our little group. You're not getting in there. Right? We booked all the rooms. You're going to show up. No, your group doesn't get in there. You're going to get there and they're going to say, sorry, the Firqa Najiyah, they booked all the rooms. And our firqa is obviously the Najiyah, because it's our firqa. كُلٌّ يَدَّعِي وَصْلًا بِلَيْلَ وَلَيْلَ لَا تُقِرُّ لَهُمْ بِذَاكَ. Everybody claims they're Layla's boyfriend, but Layla doesn't have anything to do with any of them. وكان سيدي ابن السراج يرشح هذا ويقول إذا ظهر للمرء خلاف ما يظهر لغيره فيمتنع في ذاته ولا يحمل الناس على مذهبه فإنه يدخل عليهم شغبا في أنفسهم وحيرة في دينهم. Listen to this wisdom. He keeps repeating this stuff over and over again because he's trying to get this through to us. Listen to this wisdom. This is what Sidi ibn Siraj considered to be the appropriate position. If it appears to somebody the opposite of what he sees another doing, he shouldn't do it for himself, but he shouldn't force others to follow his opinion, because this will cause shaghab. This is going to cause, it's going to disrupt society, it's going to cause unrest, it's going to cause tumult in the society. This is what's going to happen in their own selves. They're going to have shaghab fi anfusihim. Wahayratan fi dinihim. They're going to get confused about this religion. What is this religion? He says it's this, he says it's that, he says it's this. I'm confused. You turn one channel on television in the Arab world, and you've got a mufti saying, A'udhu billah, this, that, and the other, and then you turn the next channel and they're saying exactly the opposite. What's going to happen to people? Just the comment, if this is what the ulama are saying, you've got one alim saying, A'udhu billah, hadha mubtadi'un, mudallun, shaitan. And he's talking about another scholar, and then the other scholar says, A'udhu billah, hadha andu Zamheimer's, Allah ya'fu anhu. This guy, he's got Alzheimer's disease, and may Allah forgive him. This is our ummah. This is what we're reduced to. Just our ulama. This is how our ulama sound. How's the common person going to sound? If this is the ulama attacking one another on public television for millions to see, how can, and then the Almani comes along and says, and then Iblis is saying to God, like, you chose these guys, over me? Look at them. Look how pathetic they are. So in the end, Iblis is the winner in this game. The Prophet ﷺ said that Iblis has despaired. A'isa shaitan an yu'bad fi jazirat al-Arab. He's despaired of being worshipped on the Arabian Peninsula. لَكِنَّ التَّحْرِيشَ بَيْنَكُمْ. But he's content with sowing dissension amongst you. He's content with that. It's enough for him. And this is our tradition. Look how enlightened it is. And how could anybody deny? I don't understand. Are they ignorant of it? I don't know, but it just amazes me how they can take these positions of utter arrogance and arrogate to themselves. My way is the only way. These are ignorant people. This is baghi. مَا اخْتَرَفُوا إِلَّا مِن بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَهُمُ الْعِلْمُ بَغْيًا بَيْنَهُم. That's what Allah says about the people that went before us, that they didn't start differing until knowledge came to them, and each one, بَغْيًا بَيْنَهُم, Fakhruddin says, each one says, this is the right way and your way is wrong. Our religion is, I think my way is right, but I could be wrong. I think your way is wrong, but you could be right. That's our deen. That's Imam Shafi'i. And again, we have hudud to this. There are opinions outside of the limits. But this is mahajjah. It's a wide road. It's a jada. The sharia is the wide road. It's not a narrow road. Narrow is the way. Right? I mean, that's another religion. Our way is the wide way. That other religion is for the elect. Like some sects in that religion think there's only 124,000 people in paradise. Bad odds. If you're in that religion, man, those are bad odds. given there's so many billions of people have existed. But that's the elect. The elect are different. Those are the awliya and the high, the shuhada and the salihun. But there's zalimun li nafsi. These people are, Allah is merciful. They're going to be with the righteous in paradise. They have different maqams, but Allah has promised that to them. And then he says, ثم بعد ذلك اطلعت على أصول الفتية للإمام تقي الدين ابن صلاح وقال إذا كان للمفتي مختار يأخذ به في خاصة نفسه بينه للمستفتي يقول له مذهبك كذا وأنا يظهر لي كذا. If a mufti is going to give a fatwa, then, and he has an opinion, but the madhab is other, he can tell the one who's asking him for his opinion, this is what the madhab says, this is my preference. He can say that. ومثل هذا أيضا ما ذكره عياض عن ابن الأغبس كان مشاورا في الأحكام وكان إذا استفتي ربما مشاورا في الأحكام وكان إذا استفتي ربما يقول أما مذهب بلدنا فكذا وأما الذي أراه فكذا. Sometimes when he was asked for a fatwa, he would say, as for the practice in my country or my city, it's this way, but my personal preference is this. وانظر في الأقضية للخمي في المفتي إذا استفتاه أحد الزوجين في يمين بالطلاق هل يفتيه أو حتى يحضر الزوجان يحكماه بناء على التصويب وعدمه. And look at what Imam al-Lakhmi said about one of the zawjas, one of the spouses asking about divorce. Can he give his opinion, or does he need to bring the two spouses to hear both sides of the story to see what happened? ونقل عياض أيضا أن قاسم بن محمد كان أعلم من محمد بن عبد الحكم سألوا عن ابن خالد فقال له أراك تفتي الناس بما لا تعتقد فقال لو سألوني عن مذهبي لا أخبرتهم. قال القاسم بن محمد نفعنا الله باختلاف أصحاب محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم في أعمالهم لا يعمل العامل بعمل رجل منهم إلا رأى أنه في ساعة ورأى أن خيرا منه قد عمله. Iyad also mentions from Qasim bin Muhammad, and he was more knowledgeable than Muhammad bin Abd al-Hakam, who asked Sa'aru ibn Khalid. Ibn Khalid asked him and said to him, I see that you give fatwa to people with things you don't actually believe yourself. And he said, if they ask me about my personal opinion, I would tell them. In other words, he would do what he thought was the best for them, even though he might have thought something else. And then he said that Qasim ibn Muhammad said, Allah has benefited us with the differences of opinion amongst the Sahaba of the Prophet, the companions of the Prophet, in their actions. وَلَا يَعْمَلُ الْعَمْرُ بِعَمْلِ رَجُلٍ مِّنْهُمْ إِلَّا رَأَى أَنَّهُ فِي سَاعَةٍ. And these people used to do things that they saw that there was room, and they would see that other people did different things that were better than them. So this is the difference of opinion. أَيُّ ذَلِكَ أَخَذْتَ بِهِ لَمْ يَكُنْ فِي نَفْسِكَ مِنْهُ شَيْءٍ. So whatever you take, you shouldn't be upset about other things. You follow what is appropriate for you. وقال عياض ومحي الدين النووي ومذهب المحققين أن كل مجتهد مصيب. Both Qadi Iyad and Imam Nawawi, two really some of the greatest scholars in our history, they said the school of the masters is that every mujtahid is correct. وكذلك أيضا قال أبو حمد في المستصفى. And Abu Hamid in his great usuli work, al-Mustasfa, he doesn't say, but I'm saying, his great usuli work, al-Mustasfa. And Ibn al-Arabi في مساركه قال وقد بينا ذلك في المحصول. So Ibn Arabi said the same in his work on usul, which is called al-Mahsul. And all these are what our Imams have said. وقال ابن رشد في مقدماته الصحيح عن أبو الحسن الأشعري إن كل مجتهد مصيب. So Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari says, every mujtahid is correct. قال وقال البقلاني, Abu Bakr, the great Qadi, judge from Iraq. إنه مذهب مالك, this is the opinion of the Malikis. ثم قال فهذه جملة كافية لمن بصره الله وفهمه في بيان صحة القول بتصويب المجتهدين وهي من المسائل القطعيات. ثم قال فإذا صح ذلك واستحال أن الحق في واحد فليتأول الحديث. So Imam Baqlani said this is Malik's madhab, and then he said this suffices as a summation for the one who God has given inner sight to, the one who God has made to understand the opinion that all of the mujtahideen are correct. And وَهِيَ مِنَ الْمَسَائِلِ الْقَطْعِيَاتِ, this should be understood decisively in our community. And then he said, إِذَا صَحَ ذَلِكَ وَاسْتَحَالَ أَنَّ الْحَقَّ فِي وَاحِدٍ, if that is true, and it seems impossible that the truth, أَنَّ الْحَقَّ فِي وَاحِدٍ فَلْيُتَأَوَّلَ الْحَدِيثِ, then you have to make some type of interpretation of the hadith when it appears to be impossible. And this is based on the hadith, إِذَا اجْتَهَدَ الْمُجْتَهِدُ فَأَخْطَأَ, right? فَلَهُ أَجْرٌ, right? He has أجر. وَإِذَا أَصَابَ فَلَهُ أَجْران. إِذَا اجْتَهَدَ المجتهد وأصاب فله أجران, for his ijtihad and for his soundness. وإذا أخطأ فله أجر, right? So then they say, okay, well, it says if he made a mistake, so how can you say they're all correct? If he made a mistake with Allah, we don't know, or else it wouldn't be ijtihad. Ijtihad is when you don't know. If we knew with certainty from a nas sarih, there's no ijtihad fi mawrid al-nas, la ijtihad fi mawrid al-nas. But when there is ambiguity, when there's difference of opinion, that's what ijtihad is. And in those cases, we don't have, the Prophet ﷺ is not here for us to ask. Unfortunately, he's not here for us to ask. If he was here, we could just say, Ya Rasulullah, what's the legal ruling of flying in a jet plane? Because we know it pollutes the atmosphere. He might say, A'udhu billah, don't fly in jet planes. They're evil things. There's more evil in them than good. He might have said that. I don't know. We don't know. He's not here to tell us. So we have to make ijtihad. And people say flying in jet planes people do it. The ulama do it. So they say it's okay. Now we might have to rethink it, given what we know about what's happening to the ozone and what's happening to, maybe these things are much more harmful than good. Maybe we do need, our ulama need to reassess all these things. We need mujtahidun to do that. That's not an easy thing. ورأيت فتيا لابن عرفة قال قول ابن حزم أجمعوا أن متبع الرخص فاسق مردود بما أفتى به الشيخ المتفق على علمه وصلاحه عز الدين ibn Abd Salam. And as for, I saw from Ibn Arafah, the great Tunisian Maliki, he said, I saw an opinion of Ibn Hazm, who was a great scholar, but he's controversial. He's one of the controversial, like Ibn Arabi and others. He's one of the controversial ulama. He said there's an ijma' that whoever follows dispensations is a fasiq. He said this opinion is unacceptable, to say that whoever follows licenses is a fasiq. It's unacceptable. And it's better what the Shaykh, that muttafaq ala ilmihi wa salahi. See, there's ikhtilaf about Ibn Hazm. And this is, he's saying, look, everybody agrees on Izzuddin ibn Abd Salam. And he says, لا يتعين على العام إذا قلد إماما في مسألة أن يقلده في سائر مسائل الخلاف. It's not an obligation on a common person if he follows an imam in one opinion that he has to follow him in all the other opinions of khilaf. لأن الناس من لدن الصحابة إلى أن ظهرت المذاهب يسألون فيما يصنع لهم العلماء المختلفين من غير نكير من أحد وسواء اتبع الرخص في ذلك أو العزائم لأن من جعل المصيب واحدا لم يعينه ومن قال كل مجتهد مصيب فلا إنكار على من قلد في الصواب. So he says that people from the time of the Sahaba until these madhabs emerged, they would ask the ulama who differed about things, and they wouldn't say one was wrong and the other was right, whether they followed the rukhas or the azaim, because the ulama differ in the licenses and in the hard things. They're different. This is al-mizan. In the Mauritanian madrasa, This is what Shaykh Bayya bin Sadiq told me. He said in the Mauritanian madrasa, they studied the Maliki madhab until they got to the highest levels they would really master the madhab. The last book he said they read was the Mizan of Sha'rani. It's a book that he wrote to show all of the imams were guided, and they differed in rukhas and azaim. They differed in hardship and ease. When one's hard, the other's easy. When one's easy, the other's hard. And he called it the mizan. And he shows in all these different masail how this mizan is like a divinely guided. He shows how they really did create a balance in our ummah to allow people to take easy positions when they needed to and to take hard positions when they wanted to. And this was the last book that they read in order to create tolerance for other schools and other opinions. So, we have some, what should you do if you see somebody doing something that is haram, but you don't know if there is ikhtilaf in the matter? Well, it's a good point. That is one of the conditions of Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar, that you have to know that there's mujma' ala al-mas'ala. You have to know that there's mujma' alayh. That's why if you see it and you're not an alim, you can say in your heart, Allahumma innahu munkar ankarnahu. وَلَوْ اسْتَطَعْنَا لَغَيَّرْنَاهُ. That was what Ibn Umar said when he saw something he couldn't change. He said, oh Allah, this is a munkar. You don't say it out loud. You say it, this is inkarul qalb. وذلك أضعف الإيمان من رأى منكم منكرا فليغيره بيده فإن لم يستطيع فبلسانه فإن لم يستطيع فبقلبه وذلك أضعف الإيمان المؤمن القوي خير وأحب إلى الله من المؤمن الضعيف وفي كل خير ظالم لنفسه ومقتصد وسابق للخير وفي كل خير. The strong mu'min is better and more beloved to God than the weak mu'min in everything, in knowledge, in practice, everything. He's more beloved, but in both is good. So in that case, if you think it's a munkar, you reject it in your heart and say, if I was able, I would change it. Because it's a munkar in your madhab. What you learned, it's haram. But it could be in the other, unless it's, something, there are things called ma'lum min ad-din fi darura. So, like wine, everybody knows it's haram, but it could be grape juice in a wine glass. So, inna ba'd al-dhanni itham, right? And husn al-dhan, خصلتان ليس شيء يوجد فوقهما من الخيرات يحمد حسن الظن بالله ثم بالعباد فكنهما وجنبنا للعناد. Like the poet said, there's two qualities, there's nothing over them. Having a good opinion of God and having a good opinion of the servants of God. If a hadith and a teaching of the madhab differ, the example of the wali for marriage, should the hadith not take priority? Abu Hanifa knew the hadith. What he was saying was that hadith has takhsis. So if she's underage, if she's not murashada, if she's somebody that hasn't achieved fully her abilities, things like that, then she can't, because in that case she might get into something that's prohibited for her, right? So she's protected by her guardian until she's of age and she can think for herself. At that point, so he understood it differently from the other imams. It's not that he didn't know the hadith. This is really important about these imams. They knew all the hadiths. There's less than 1,000 hadiths that relate to ahkam, right? Less than 1,000. Some say there's less than 500. But the point is that they knew these hadiths with rare exception. There might be some instances where they didn't, but they really knew them. Imam Malik knew the hadith on the prohibition of fasting on Friday, but he didn't take it because he had another dalil he thought was stronger. Many examples of that. So it's important to know that, and this question is exactly how people fall into the modern discourse. Look at these Malikis. The hadith clearly says they should hold their hands on their, why are they leaving it at the sides? right? And there's a book that was written years ago, which by an Azhari Imam. It was written at the request of Hassan al-Banna. It's called Fiqh al-Sunnah. If you read that book, which nobody who's not trained in ilm should read that book. If you're not trained as a faqih, you should not read that book. That book presents a very simplistic view of the madhabs, and you can really misunderstand because he's not dealing with the usul of the imams. And so he'll present dalils, but he doesn't understand that within the madhab, that dalil is not the strongest dalil. So he's basically doing tarjih. So he's creating another madhab. That's what madhabs are. They're mujtahidun giving their opinion of what should be followed and what shouldn't be. And that's why, like Nasiruddin al-Albani's book, Salatun Nabi Ka'annaka Tarahu, the prayer of the Prophet as if you see it. That's as if you were Nasiruddin al-Albani seeing it, based on him reading hadith. The Hanafis, they saw Abu Hanifa saw Sahaba praying. His prayer is the prayer of Ibn Mas'ud. Imam Malik had 600 teachers from the Tabi'een who saw the Sahaba praying, including Ibn Umar. One of his dominant teachers was Nafi', the Mawla of Ibn Umar. Imam Malik studied with him. Nafi' lived with Ibn Umar, who was, of all the Sahaba, he was one of the strictest in following how the Prophet did everything. And the Prophet said, Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli, not ka'annaka tarahu. He didn't say pray as if you see me praying, based on your reading hadith of how I prayed. He said, pray as you see me praying. Who saw them praying? The Sahaba. Who did they transmit it to? The Tabi'un. Who did they transmit it to? The Tabi'in. This is how our prayer, it's mutawatir. Now if you say, well then why are there differences in praying? What differences are there? You think about this. Go to Mecca right now or Medina. You're praying 5 prayers a day, 5 prayers a day. Not 6, not 7, not 4, not 3. You're praying 5 prayers a day. Whether you're Ibadi, whether you're Ithna Ashari, whether you're Zaydi, whether you're Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, Hanbali. It doesn't matter what sect of Islam you come from. In Mecca and Medina, they all pray 5 prayers a day because all 4 imams, all of the imams are in agreement on that. How are they praying? Standing, qiyam. Oh, some people put it here, some people put it here, some people put it here, some do things like that, right? And some people leave it here, based on practice. The Prophet ﷺ we know he did the qabd. For me, the strongest dalil for the qabd is in the Muwatta of Imam Malik. People say, well, there it is in the Muwatta. Why don't the Malikis do it? Because Malik put several hadiths in the Muwatta that he didn't practice to show, I know the hadith, because it's taken from the Mudawwana, not from the Muwatta. And there's a khilaf amongst the Malikis. The dominant opinion is leave the hands at the side. Now, if you're going to do qabd, for me, the strongest opinion is the Hanafi. Because there's no hadith that indicates where the Prophet put his hands except the weak hadith that Abu Hanifa took, that he put it under the surah. So when he prayed, they go from here. Some people go from here. Hadwa mankibain, that's where the Malikis go. Some go from behind the ears, right? But they still do the same thing. Right? Whether you do it from here or here, it's the same thing. Allahu Akbar. And then either there, the Shafi'is put it above the surah. فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ. Put it on the nahar, according, that's a weak tafsir, but that is an opinion. And then, so those aren't big differences. There's all standing, and then Fatiha, they all agree on Fatiha. And then they go into ruku', same ruku'. Then they come out of ruku', have to be istiqamah. Then they go into sajda, same sajda. Then they go into julus, same julus with a difference of iftirash, slight difference in where you put your feet. Then they go back into sajda, and then they go up again. That's 1 rak'ah. That's a miracle that our religion prays the same way. There's no other religion on earth in which all of the entire ummah is united in prayer. with slight differences, just relax. Look, I'm a Maliki. I'm bothered by Malikis that do it like that. It's distracting, even to me. I've got a guy next to me and he's going like that. That wasn't how I was taught. It's a very slight movement. Even Ibn al-Arabi says, don't wave it like that. He said, إِنَّهَا بَلِيَّةٌ لَا تَتْبَعُ مَا فِي الْعُتْبِيَّةِ فَإِنَّهَا بَلِيَّةٌ. Don't do the thing that they say in the Utbi. So there's khilaf about that. But the Malikis, they do the thing, or some put it like that and do it up and down. That's the dominant opinion like that. Some do it that and then they just raise it when they do the Shahada. They put their hands same place. These are very slight differences. The prayer is amazingly unified, really. And then tajweed to me is the great miracle of our ummah. Because nobody in the history of religion has preserved the recitation of their revelation like the Muslims. Nobody. The Greeks, if I studied Koine Greek, my teacher who was a master of New Testament Greek, she didn't know how certain things were sounded at the time of Jesus because they don't have tajweed. The Jews differ on how they pronounce things. They don't have the tajweed that we have in recitation of the Torah. They learned a lot of these things from us. How they recite now, they learn these from. This is fact in Jewish religion. Can you please clarify further how permitting some sinfulness, less sin, balanced with the idea of flexibility within the boundaries of Sharia? Yeah, they answered their own question. It has to do with degrees of transgression, avoiding greater harm. That's it. So, in other words, if by forbidding the sinfulness it's going to lead to a greater sin, you don't do it. Those are from the conditions of commanding to good and forbidding evil. And that takes hikmah, وَمَنْ يُؤْتَ الْحِكْمَةَ فَقَدْ أُوتِيَ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. Whoever's given hikmah, they have a great good they've been given. The Prophet, لِيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابُ وَالْحِكْمَةِ, to teach them the book and the wisdom of how to apply the book, when to apply the book, when not to apply the book. What about differing between Ali and Muawiyah? They fought each other. Please explain. How do we reconcile this with what we are learning? That's a really good question. They made ijtihad, and their ijtihad led to a fitna. It's called a fitna. So fitnas happen, undeniably. The proof that the Sahaba did it is a proof that even the best people fall into fitna. And this is part of, it's a learning lesson. But the amazing thing about those people is that they had great magnanimity in their character, and they displayed incredible displays of magnanimity. The Umayyad, unfortunately, did some terrible things. Thank God for Umar ibn Abd al-Aziz, who came. He was from Bani Umayyah, and he rectified things. Some people call him the Khalif al-Khamis, the fifth rightly guided caliph, because he stopped a lot of the things that they were doing. But that it happens. Fitna happens. So it's a good question, and fitna does happen. What is the difference between the following position? You said if some ulama encourage something and others prohibit it, like reciting the Quran for the dead, we should side with the Rahmah, Ibn Rushd. But another opinion you mentioned, من اختلف العلماء على تحريره وتحريمه. Yeah, because halal and haram is different from ikhtilaf in karahiyah. If it's an ikhtilaf in karahiyah, then doing it is better than not doing it. If it's an ikhtilaf in prohibition, then not doing it is better than doing it. That's the difference. So maybe I wasn't clear on that. What is the name of the book you are reading from? This book is called Sanan al-Muhtadin. Sanan. Mistakenly sometimes called Sunan. It's Sanan. Sanan is a road, so it's the path of the rightly guided. Fi maqamat ad-din, in the stations of this religion, of which he's identified 9. And it's by Muhammad bin Yusuf al-Abdari, meaning he's from the family, the Qurayshi, Abdul Dar, the Bayt Abdul Dar. He's an Abdari. So he's a Qurayshi originally. al-Gharanati. He was from Andalusia, Granada. He died in 897, and he's known as al-Mawaq or Sidi al-Mawaq. He's a famous Maliki scholar. He's still, to this day, his books are studied in the madhab. Tajul Iklil is a very important resource for Maliki fuqaha in fiqh that he wrote. He was a great usuli scholar, and he literally is Khatimat Ulama al-Andalus. He's the last great alim of Andalusia. There's nobody after him. He has a famous miracle that's mentioned in Ahmed Baba Timbukti, I think mentions, or Ibn Farahun, one of them, that when they surrendered Granada, he didn't want to go with the group to visit the Christians. So he stayed in his home. And they surrendered with 80 conditions. So it wasn't an unconditional surrender. One of their conditions, they would be left to practice their religion freely. The Pope later on rescinded that, saying that they were infidels and that we had no obligation to fulfill our treaty with them. But the minister wanted, the Christian minister wanted to meet the most learned of their scholars. And so they went to Sidi al-Mawaq and they asked him to come, and he didn't want to go. And they begged him, so he went. When the Christian minister put out his hand, Mawaq kissed his hand, which really ticked off the ulama, because they thought it was khunu', like humiliating them. And they spoke, and then when he left, the man's hand swelled up and started turning black. And he said, "Go get that man and bring him back." And they brought him back, and he took his hand, and the swelling went down, and the color restored. And many people saw that miracle. And they say, in interpreting it, that he was letting them know, that you've defeated us materially, but watch out, because there's still spiritual power in our community. So, wallahu a'lam. Alhamdulillah, subhanakallah wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. I want to welcome Sifra Davud Alu, one of the notables of Turkey. Her father's a great man, and she's a great woman too, but and her companions that are here as guests, inshallah. We're really their guests, but they're our guests also. So we welcome them, and inshallah, Allah yubarak fikum.